Mr. D was a fit and active man who had served in the RAF. His daughter told us more. Her words are spoken by an actor.
He was lovely, my dad. Really kind and caring. He was very active and didn't drink or smoke. He exercised regularly and had 3 dogs which he would walk for miles. He was a lovely man. All the children on the estate where he lived used to call him Grandad.
Mr. D had a long-standing history of peptic ulcer disease and was admitted to Royal Bolton Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, suffering from severe back and stomach pain. After various tests, he was eventually diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer. His daughter described some of her experiences on the ward where he was being cared for.
They put him in the very end of the ward, the furthest bed from the nurses' station. Anyway, we'd go and visit him, and he was always in pain, always. He wouldn't complain, he wouldn't say anything, but he was in pain, and we'd ask for medication for him. Well, we'd be sat there for the 2 hours visiting time, and they still didn't bring any medication to him. One day, I was having a chat with him, and he really thought he was dying. To be honest, I did too. I knew he was dying before he went into that hospital. As the days went on, he just got worse. He couldn't drink, he couldn't swallow. They didn't check if he was eating. And because he was in such pain when he went into hospital, he couldn't lie down, so he had to sit in a chair. This was day and night. I couldn't understand why they couldn't give him some sort of pain relief. All he wanted was to have a sleep, and he couldn't. From the moment cancer was diagnosed, my dad was completely ignored. It was as if he didn't exist. He was an old man and was dying.
Mr. D wanted to die at home, so arrangements were made to discharge him into the care of his family. His daughter picks up the story.
The morning came and we waited and waited. My dad didn't come and we kept ringing the hospital and they kept telling us that they were waiting for an ambulance. When it got to 2 p.m, visiting time, I went with my mother. I nearly died when I saw him. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They pulled the curtains around his bed so nobody could see him. He was sat in this chair. For a split second, I honestly thought he'd died because he wasn't moving. His mouth was all dry and sore. His tongue was like a piece of dried up leather. Oh, it was awful. They obviously had got him ready for discharge because his bag was packed and on his bed, and his bed had been stripped. They'd taken his drip out of him, and the tube had fallen onto the floor and had leaked. It turned out they got him ready for discharge at 6 a.m. that morning and hadn't been anywhere near him since. We wanted the toilet, and they'd given him a panic button, but they'd tucked it behind his back and he couldn't reach it. He couldn't get anyone's attention because he was shut away behind the curtain. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move.
Appalled by what they saw, Mr. D's family decided to take him home themselves straight away. But when they got home, the district nurse found there was no proper discharge documentation and that Mr. D had not been given the right pain relief. He had been given only 2 small bottles of Oromorph, which he could not take because he could not swallow.
The nurse got on the phone to the hospital, but they said that my dad had been discharged from this hospital by his family and was no longer their responsibility. The nurse was ringing everywhere to find chemists and pharmacists that were open to get the medication. We got in touch with an on-call GP surgery in Bolton. We had to go there to get the GP to sign the forms and then find a pharmacy that was open to get some drugs for him. This is what happened every time he needed medication.
Mr. D's condition worsened and he became gravely ill. He died 3 days after he was discharged on the following Tuesday. Mr. D's daughter complained first to the Trust about his care and treatment and then to the Healthcare Commission. But she was dissatisfied with the outcome and asked the Ombudsman to investigate. The Ombudsman's investigation found that Mr. D's care and treatment had been below standard in several ways, and some aspects of his discharge were poorly planned. The family's distress and suffering was compounded by the Trust's failure to deal with all the issues in the complaint. In line with the Ombudsman's recommendations, the Trust apologised to Mr. D's daughter and paid her compensation of £2,000. Perhaps more importantly, they demonstrated to her that they had learned from her complaint by sharing an action plan showing how they would prevent a repeat of their failings.
I was really happy that the Ombudsman managed to get my questions answered, because when I first started the complaints procedure, I felt that the hospital completely ignored me. After that, I thought I would never give up on this, because my dad wouldn't. The one thing he couldn't stand was injustice, and I did say to him before he died that I was going to complain about this and wouldn't stop until I got answers.